TutorCruncher has a wide range of other resources, do they not, to help individual tutors?
Absolutely. And actually, there are a couple of big developments on that front that I thought would be good to talk about. I don't think we've spoken about them publicly yet. So this is the big news drop, Qualified Tutor.
Welcome to the Qualified Tutor podcast. I'm your host, Ludo Miller, and I'll be interviewing tutors and thought leaders from across the tutoring landscape to inspire, inform, and motivate you to become the best tutor you can be. The Qualified Tutor community is a safe and supportive space for tutors who love to learn and grow. We offer training, resources, ideas, and a chance to connect with like-minded tutors. If you'd like to continue the conversation, join our Qualified Tutor community at www.qualifiedtutorcommunity.org or find it in the show notes.
Welcome to the next episode of the Qualified Tutor podcast. Today we are joined by Fionn Finnegan, Head of Sales and Marketing at TutorCruncher. TutorCruncher quite rightly and proudly market themselves as tutoring business management software. That sounds very high level and that sounds like something that perhaps many tutors and agencies haven't considered before, but really what TutorCruncher do is they streamline an agency's service, a tutor's service. They build in tools for filing billing reports, tracking progress, analytics, and it's a way for agencies really to bring everything together, to pay their tutors on time, to communicate with their clients. And TutorCruncher has seen huge growth since it first began in 2013. A little background of TutorCruncher, as Fionn was recently describing to me, the TutorCruncher began in 2008 as in-house software for an agency called Bright Young Things. And in 2013, as it became clear that the product was a commercially viable product in and of itself, they moved outwards to start marketing to a larger number of agencies. So we've caught them just at a great time in their development. And we are delighted to be bringing them on, not only because TutorCruncher play a huge role in the tutoring industry today, but also because on a personal level, I, as a tutor, have used TutorCruncher many times and believe it's really one of the greatest additions that the tutoring industry has seen. So welcome, Fionn.
Thank you very much. What a fantastic introduction. I'll be doing very well to live up to that. I'm currently thinking about open positions on our marketing team, Ludo. We'd love to have you along.
Yeah, well, if I can sell it like that to every potential client, then perhaps. But no, really, it's great to have a different perspective of the tutoring industry as part of the show. We've had educationalists and we've had roundtables with agencies and schools, but this is a new angle and really a very important angle to show the kind of direction that tutoring is going in. So yeah. I guess even though I've given a brief introduction there, I feel like the first thing our listeners are going to want to hear is what is TutorCruncher and what role does it play in the industry?
Absolutely, and I think it's a very good thing to clear up at the start, because I do think it's something that people get a little bit confused about with us sometimes. And that's something that we've kind of had to work on in our, I guess, messaging out to tutoring agencies themselves, but also, the individual tutors who come across us as well as even individual clients. So clients tend to see us as a tutoring agency ourselves. Tutors tend to see us maybe as something more approaching Uber for tutors. But I guess the best analogy would probably be something like Salesforce for tutoring companies. So agencies and small tutoring companies like Salesforce, but more targeted towards the tutoring as an industry, and with a lot more tools at its disposal. So a little bit, as you say, more niche into this industry, which has so many niche aspects to it and works so differently than so many other industries that people might say provide software for or might work in themselves. There's a lot going on. So yeah, our position is kind of to be a business management software that just makes but tutors' lives easier, the companies themselves, and ultimately then maybe the clients as well.
Yeah. And
So,
maybe it would be good. Yeah, it'd be good just to, when you say to make tutors and agencies' lives easier, it would be good maybe just to expand a little bit on how exactly that's done.
Yeah, so I guess to kind of extend that Salesforce analogy, we would handle everything. We have systems for, say, tutor applications to come through to agencies online, so they can kind of just evaluate them on the fly. We have things like website plugins that will bring client inquiries through to agencies and open up opportunities for them. We have systems which would match clients based on their inquiry details with tutors who match their particular needs, whether it's based on physical location or the kind of subjects they teach, the age ranges that they work with. And we would also handle everything. So we'd handle the scheduling side of things, and also the invoicing, billing, analytics, all that kind of management back-end stuff as well.
Yeah, which is really important, genuinely, and it's something that many tutors spend lots of time trying to figure out and kind of work out. And I know when I began as an independent tutor, that was something that always took up a lot of headspace, was working out when to invoice a client, when to chase up with them, how to send out reports to them, when to send out reports to them. So imagine that on a kind of agency-wide scale, that would be such a headache. And I really think that TutorCruncher brings that all together, which is really the way that these kind of industries are moving. And I guess that leads me on to my next question, which is kind of about how you say there that you think tutoring can kind of reflect other industries in this way. It's kind of, we use the word gig economy as something that perhaps has never been attributed to tutoring before. But how do you think a tech-driven approach to tutoring can function in today's tutoring industry? Could a gig economy approach work, let's say?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. And to kind of build on how you got there, I do think that the software that underlies a lot of these things impacts business processes and ultimately, tutors' kind of day-to-day work probably much more than people give it credit for. And I think maybe people would be surprised that certain aspects, maybe the limitations of software, but also the capabilities of it, end up influencing people's day-to-day, maybe more so than they might realize if they weren't familiar with it. So I do think it's an interesting thing to talk about. In terms of the gig economy specifically, that is an interesting, I guess, development in the tutoring market. The way that I would usually split up tutoring, say, agencies or companies who work with multiple tutors is in terms of agencies that cost themselves more like a listing service. So say Tutor Hunt would be one example of this, where you go online, you select a tutor that you want to work with, and usually there's just one upfront matching fee. So you pay to get their contact information and to initiate contact with them. And then after that, they kind of handle the client relationship. Whereas the more traditional approach would be, I guess, a more traditional agency would handle the client inquiry, find a tutor who would make sense to work with that person, and they'd take an ongoing fee over time as the lessons progress, but they would handle the full relationship. And as you said before, the stuff that you were looking into in terms of invoicing and lesson reports and all that kind of thing. So I think that one reason that maybe the gig economy in tutoring hasn't taken off, that listing service approach hasn't taken off in quite the same way, as I think you used an example when you were speaking before of things like food delivery companies, so Deliveroo, or maybe go back to the Uber example. I think the tutoring comes along with a greater need for trust in the people that you're working with, faith in their qualifications, faith in the fact that they have been vetted and they've been approved by someone reputable, that listing agencies aren't in as much of a position to provide, because they don't they're not generally responsible for the tutors that they connect you with. They're more kind of like a marketplace, whereas an agency takes a more active role in vetting these people who, and these are people, whether it's online or face-to-face, that are going to be working directly with your child, probably over an extensive period of time. Trust is a really important factor in that. So that's definitely an impact on something like the gig economy taking to tutoring. Also, one of the interesting things, and this isn't necessarily an insight from quantitative data from our side, but just in my own role of talking to new companies as they're founded, we do find there is a great tendency among new companies to want to run as a listing service, generally because, and I can understand the motivation to this, is that they think of a listing service as something like passive income. So clients come to their site, they look for individual tutors, they get matched, and then the money comes in. And that's a kind of high level concept of what a lot of people expect. Funnily enough, though, the new companies that we tend to see doing very well are people who take a more active role in managing the client relationship. And I think that's one thing that it is quite easy for new tutoring companies to overlook, is that the traditional agency approach can work really, really well if they are clear about what value they're adding to that relationship. So if it's dealing with client invoices, client queries, if it's dealing with lesson reports and problems, you'll probably have more insight into this than I'd have being a tutor yourself. But my understanding is that a lot of tutors enjoy tutoring and don't necessarily enjoy the, paraphernalia that comes associated with it, like managing client relationships. So I think that's where agencies can really add value. And we see that those agencies that are clear about what value they're adding in that process really do tend to outperform people who just see themselves as a listing agency and are looking for more a passive stream of income.
And now, a brief word from our founder, Julia Silver.
If you'd like to hear more about the ideas we touch on here, or gain the tools to take your own tutoring to the next level, the Qualification for Tutors could be for you. This live online seminar is facilitated by industry experts who, over 4 Zoom workshops, will cover the foundations of teaching and learning and how it relates to you as a tutor. The workshops are full of rich discussions where you'll learn alongside other tutors and connect on a professional level. We will teach you how to be the kind of tutor every child remembers. Visit our community space at qualifiedtutorcommunity.org and sign up now for our transformative course. We'll see you there.
Are there requirements or are there even criteria that you're looking for in an agency before taking them on? Or is it really, is your potential market, is it any kind of organization, agency, independent tutor? What are the
criteria? We will absolutely have a conversation with anyone, and we kind of prioritize that in a way that a lot of, we only have so many competitors in the space, but our competitors tend to rely on email. So we have some competitors who won't speak to people over the phone, regardless of the circumstance. We're not like that. We have phone conversations and video calls with a very high number of the people who sign up to our software. And we use those opportunities to talk through exactly where they're at, what they're looking for from the software. I'm not in the business of turning anyone away. I generally think that TutorCruncher has a very wide range of applications, but it is very helpful to know what people are looking for from the software, how they're going to, say, adapt their businesses when they make a change to using TutorCruncher, or how they're setting up for the first time. I guess that's given me a good insight into what goes through people's minds, especially as they set up new companies, but also for people who have been running established agencies for years and are making a change. Sorry, I'm not sure, I maybe strayed from your original question there, but has that answered it, or feel free to ask me again?
No. That's there's. I guess the key message really is that that there aren't any kind of minimum criteria. I know that some people who've perhaps used TutorCruncher here and there believe that it's for kind of the big agencies to streamline that high level and high kind of content of billing and reports and paying tutors. But really, I think it's important that it's to make people aware that it's not just about that, and it's not kind of TutorCruncher is existing for those smaller organisations and agencies and tutors as well. And I think that's really one of its biggest draws.
Yeah, and I would kind of emphasise as well, regardless of the size of the agency, if growth is a factor, and also even if it's it's one person alone doing a few lessons a week, I'm sure in that person's current situation they could operate it off an Excel spreadsheet, and that's only so much time devoted to that. That's not necessarily a big deal. But if they do have in their head that they would like to really go a lot further as they go on, it probably makes sense to move on to TutorCruncher from early days. The reason I say that, and that's not necessarily pure self-interest, is when companies are a little bit more established. So if they're in, let's say, a significant growth phase, if they've already set up a lot of their processes, it can be a lot more awkward to change how they manage their business. So with a management software like ours, we can do a lot that Excel can't. And so obviously there is this very good reason for people to move on to TutorCruncher. But equally, people can get quite attached to the function of an Excel spreadsheet in a way that maybe is probably surprising when you first come across it. And it can make the transition between software just a little clunky and a little bit more, a little bit more painful than it would be otherwise. So I would recommend, if someone has an eye to growth, that it makes sense probably from day one to know what your processes are and to keep them consistent, rather than, I guess, changing course mid-race. It's probably more streamlined. And TutorCruncher at least bills based on usage only. So even if someone signs up from day one, it's not that they're paying a disproportionately high, rate compared to some other company. Everyone's kind of on a level playing field on the basis of the fact that if you don't use TutorCruncher, we bill you much less. If you use it a lot, we bill you more. So it's pretty equitable in that regard.
Yeah, well done.
Thank you.
And moving in that same direction, how then can TutorCruncher help individual tutors? Obviously they may not have so many clients that they need their own management software, but TutorCruncher has a wide range of other resources. Do they not to help individual tutors?
Absolutely. And actually, there are a couple of big developments on that front that I thought would be good to talk about. I don't think we've spoken about them publicly yet. So this is the big news drop, Qualified Tutor. So we have a couple of new developments on the way. The first one coming up is we are revamping what we've traditionally called global profiles. So basically, because as we've discussed in the past, we've been pretty agency-centric, and we're going to continue serving agencies very directly. But we wanted to make it a little bit more approachable for tutors and to give them their own platform, I suppose. So we've had, the way it's been up until now is that, say, a tutor signs up to agency number 1 and they happen to use TutorCruncher, and they also happen to sign up to agency number 2 and they also use TutorCruncher, which is pretty common in the UK because they're pretty widespread. We have already linked those profiles. That's always been the case, that they've been connected and you can jump between the two of them. What we're now introducing, and this is only a few weeks away, is a unified global profile. So a tutor will log into their own personal TutorCruncher account from which they can manage all the agencies that they work with. So it'll be a lot more unified. It'll be a lot less jumping between them. These are accounts designed for tutors. that they can manage the agencies they work with. So that's phase one, which will be pretty exciting. Phase two is an app. So, a mobile app, Apple or Android, which would, again, extend that functionality. So tutors would have individual accounts from which they would manage all of the agencies that they work with, but also independent work. So if they tutor for somebody who lives down the road or a friend of a friend or something like that, and it's not going through an agency, they would still be able to use this app to manage that, to, like we were speaking about before, to do the billing, to send the lesson reports, all that kind of stuff independently. So really kind of empowering small tutors, not only to work with the big agencies, but also to manage their independent stuff and be kind of more of a hub, not only for the companies, but for individual tutors, which we are pretty confident should benefit everybody in that setup.
It's huge. That I really can't stress enough how important it is in making tutors professionals. It's Absolutely. A really large part of the qualified tutor ethos, and it's amazing to see that reflected in TutorCruncher as well.
It's great. Well, fantastic that for the public unveiling, we got some good feedback. I'll report that to the devs. They'll be smiling ear to ear.
Yeah. This would be the wrong time, I think, to douse it, to put it out. But yeah, no, I'm very much in favour of giving tutors the platform and the tools to sell themselves as professionals. In the same way that we often talk about kind of doctors or plumbers or dentists. In that same way, they see themselves as professionals. They are given the tools to act as professionals, and they are viewed by clients as professionals. And for too long, I think tutors have been seen as kind of bit part and as seen as kind of part-time and low-paid and that kind of in that kind of bracket. But really, allowing individual tutors to use this tool that can pull together all of the kind of friends and cousins and neighbours, plus also maybe the small-time agency work they do, pulling that all together into their own space is a huge, huge step. And that's something that I think a large proportion of our listeners will relate to and hopefully will act on. Although important to stress that this part of the conversation is not a sponsored sales pitch for TutorCruncher, but it is a really important development.
Tried as I did. It is incorruptible.
Yeah, exactly. Now, moving on to another kind of potential big development, and we heard recently on our podcast the importance of Bramble's wide-scale survey that they completed with regard to online tutoring this summer, and really the insights that could give. We wanted to touch here on TutorCruncher's recent, the anonymised data that they've collected and what that has told you guys so far.
Yeah, so I think there's a few interesting things of note in this data. So we have a little bit about the US as well. I'll talk about the UK first, obviously, but it's interesting to kind of see a comparison with that other market. In the UK, we looked at, one of the fields we looked at was which subjects are the least saturated with tutors. So kind of what we see is the most lucrative subjects. Basically, these are subjects taught that have the highest number of lessons per tutors that teach those subjects. So the two that we came up with that were accounting, kind of generally accounting and actuarial studies, and also civil engineering. So tutors who taught those subjects seem to have the most lessons available to them generally, and were kind of in competition with the fewest other tutors. So I thought that was kind of very interesting, especially with tutors kind of choosing a specialization now. That might be something to be aware of. And we also looked at student engagement. So the way we measured student engagement was we looked at the relationships. So we looked at the relationship, any given relationship between a tutor and a student, and how many lessons actually occur between those two before it tends to kind of fizzle out. And the subjects in which we saw the highest levels of student engagement Ancient languages tops the list, followed in a close second place by languages of India. Then we saw special needs help, maths and fine arts, also in that high engagement category. So it was interesting to see if even as widely adopted a subject as maths has such a high user engagement. So that was also a thing of note. We noticed generally this is more about the agencies themselves who provide that tutoring, but 44% who operated in the UK were based out of London. So you see the usual kind of London versus rest of the UK divide there, particularly around tutoring. It seems pretty intense. The average cost of a lesson over all of the lessons over the last 2 years was £53 in the UK. And the average length of one of those tutor-student relationships was about 10 lessons. Obviously, as we said before, we saw much higher engagement in things like ancient languages. So that was all quite interesting. To compare that to the US, the most demand for tutors, Latin made the top 3 as well, which is interesting that it's both high in demand here in the UK and in the US. But we also saw much higher demand in the US for math and science, which was interesting in that I know, not necessarily from the data, but even just from working with a lot of US companies, that so many of them focus on math tutoring, and it still seems to be comparatively underserved. We also saw really high US user engagement in subjects, ancient languages again, Latin, Greek, also Russian and business consultancy were very high up there. And they were, Latin and Russian specifically, were very high in demand in the US and in engagement. And this is one of the most interesting things compared to the UK, because the average price of a tutoring lesson in the US was $27. So if you recall from a moment ago, that compares with an average price per lesson in the UK of £53. So, you don't even have to go into the conversion to see that UK lessons are roughly twice as expensive on average as US lessons. I imagine a lot of that has been affected by the fact that the US tends to be more informal, more online, less, I guess, professional, and less of an emphasis on things like qualification than we are in the UK, but still interesting, and I'm sure a little bit disheartening to some of the parents out there to hear how expensive UK lessons are in comparison.
Yeah, and this is data that I guess many people in the tutoring industry have not seen before. That's a really fascinating insight into, just simple things like the price of a session, which is obviously so important for each element of the tutoring service. The parent, the tutor, and if there's an agency involved as well, the agency. It's right at the heart of how affordable it is, and therefore how viable tutoring is. And it's something that we have to think about every single day. So learning that the average lesson cost is so much higher in the UK is perhaps telling for some parties, to some agencies, for some tutors, about whether they should lower, or if they feel they're much below that, maybe they feel that they should be kind of further onto the average lesson cost. So that data is really helpful in informing kind of each element, each party of the tutoring service.
It was interesting, just to kind of build on that UK-US divide on price. I do think that there's probably, I'm sure there's an aspect of it, and that things tutoring in the UK is probably just more expensive, as you would expect from that. But I would imagine there are other things affecting that. So, and again, this is slightly anecdotal and based off conversations that we have with US companies. They do, though, tend to be a lot less focused on things like qualification and generally a lot more, I suppose, as you would expect, a bit more free market to the approach, and then whoever can teach it, hop online, we'll do an on-demand session and we'll teach it. Maybe they're shorter, maybe they're much more informal, which is probably generally true about the US's market. So I would caution people from, I suppose, generally thinking that tutoring prices are just massively inflated. I'm sure that it seems likely that that's a factor as well. But it's interesting to see the aggregate disparity is obviously pretty big.
Yeah, and it's great to have this just as a beginning to looking into data for tutoring. And this is obviously not the first kind of data that's come out like this, but this is a really important step in both comparing, the UK to international tutoring, to tutoring internationally, but also to comparing, how many lessons on average each tutor student has, the price, the kind of the time that's spent going into each session. This is really important stuff to know, and we can be informed by the data. So thank you very much, Fionn, for sharing that. I think just to draw this chat to a close, there's been so much in that. I think that's given a huge insight into what TutorCruncher can offer, and for those people who've heard of TutorCruncher before, a little bit more understanding of what TutorCruncher can actually do for them, and for those people who have never heard of TutorCruncher, maybe an insight into how tutoring can be streamlined, into the kind of the next steps, the developments in tutoring, because a lot of people who have struggled by themselves for a few years now, with the kind of all the, as you say, the paraphernalia that comes with tutoring, the billing, the reports, the payments, this could well be the solution for them. But my final question is one that we have recently been ending our conversations with, because it really gives a good insight into the different perspectives of experts, in different parts of the tutoring industry. But Fionn, if you could wave a magic wand over the educational landscape today, what would we see?
That is a very good question, and it kind of challenges, I guess, our way of thinking about it. It's not something that I often that spends a lot of time on my mind. So definitely give me pause. I think that one of the big developments, and this kind of ties into the NTP stuff that we here talked about, it would be great to see more local authorities getting involved with tutoring, and maybe being a little bit more open to tutoring as a supplement to traditional school-based education. I'm sure we all know, listening to this podcast, what the benefits are of one-to-one education for so many students. It would be great to see that employed a little bit more frequently. And also, tutoring comes with great flexibility, which is, I think, that's something that local authorities could take advantage of. We don't seem to be too bad generally in the UK in dealing with local authorities, but it would be great to see, and hopefully NTP will enhance that. And also, on a general note, TutorCruncher is very happy to run the kind of background business, and very happy to work with tools that are available for things like online learning. But honestly, we'd love to see more. So when I talk about tools for online learning, I'm thinking of things like whiteboards. So you mentioned Bramble earlier. We already do integrate with them. But if there are more tools available for things like whiteboards, online learning, online assessment as well, we would love to see that more of those. Ultimately, the better served, hopefully, everyone in this industry will be. So I would really encourage anyone who's involved with online learning tools, who's involved with online assessment tools, to reach out to us and let us know, because we're always looking for new people to chat to and integrate with, and see if we can improve our offerings by offering better integrations with services like that.
Yeah, exactly. And off the back of this will kind of expose TutorCruncher to a higher number of qualified tutors and those in our community. So there is a kind of a highly engaged and highly motivated network of tutors building in our community space. And although we're not going to force TutorCruncher as a requirement upon any tutor, this speaks for itself. This conversation does, and your service does. So hopefully this can be brought to a greater number of tutors to streamline their services, which is what we're always looking to do as tutors, is improve our efficiency. We don't want to be up all night writing reports when we could be spending that time planning new sessions, or even maybe just getting to bed earlier. So
Absolutely.
thank you very much, Fionn, for
problem at all.
coming on. It's very, very kind of you to join us and to explain what TutorCruncher is and the crucial role that it plays in tutoring at the moment. I hope you enjoyed that, and we can certainly welcome you back on in the near future.
Absolutely, Ludo. I would love to. And yeah, I think we share a lot of very common goals in terms of making this industry just more livable for everyone who's a part of it. So absolutely, and congratulations on the podcast, and hope the strong success continues. Yeah, fantastic. Well, I really appreciate you having me on.
Not a problem. Okay, thanks very much, Fionn.
Great, it was lovely speaking to you.
You too. Bye.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Qualified Tutor podcast, where tutors share their expertise to support the tutoring community. If you'd like to continue the conversation, join our Qualified Tutor community at www.qualifiedtutorcommunity.org or find it in the show notes below. We exist to connect, share, and learn with you, because tutoring is a small job that makes a big difference.